House for CLNS Media. Now, I know you're usually used to John Zanis being in this window next to me, and we all love John. But I was thinking I might need someone with a little more optimism. You guys know my speed, but also someone who can bring the context, bring me down when I'm a little too optimistic. And I think personally, I found the perfect partner. I'm extremely excited for this introduction. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, my new permanent co host for the show and fellow beat buddy, Khari Thompson. Khari, welcome, baby.
What's going on? Yo, y'all thought you could get rid of me? Y'all thought you could get rid of me? No, I'm back. I'm sorry. I'm back. Yo, man, so happy to be on here with you. Obviously, like, you've been on my podcast. I'm thrilled to be on this show with you and doing it on a more permanent basis. We just have fun, man. We just have fun talking about this game. I love it.
And we're going to make it easy because, you guys know I'm the film guy. I'm new to the beat. I'm finding my way. But Khari, man, you're a seasoned vet. So when it comes to a lot of that, that veteran savvy stuff, that's where you come in. And I'm just going to be the novice learning from you, giving my 2 cents, but we're equal buddies in this.
Okay, we're really hyping. You're really hyping me up a little bit right now. I don't know if I feel comfortable with that, but you know what? I'm gonna pretend like I do.
Gonna learn to love the love, baby. Gonna learn to love the love.
Yes, sir. Man. So first of all, like I can't wait till you actually come out here.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll be out there soon.
Yes. But I mean, how have you been, man? How you been doing?
Man, moving's been a lot. I'm literally looking at just a sea of packages, of boxes, because we're making the move. We're shipping up to Boston. It's going to take a couple weeks. There's still some things I got to work out. Got to get all the way across the country, but I'm extremely excited, man. How you doing? What's new with you?
Man, well, so obviously, I moved over from the sports realm over to WBUR in Boston, where they don't do quite as much sports. I've been begging, I've been clamoring to do some Patriots, but I don't think they're going to let me do it until there's actually like training camp and games going on. Can't blame them because most of the public radio audience isn't really all about that action when it comes to sports. But, I got to talk some basketball today. That was fun. But, my first love is football. I can't help myself. So, I had to scratch the itch, man. So I'm, again.
Perfect place.
Yeah. Brought me back to you.
All right. So, I know what the people are here for. The people are here for us, especially now that I've got an amazing new co-host. Maybe we get into some Pat stuff. What do we think?
Maybe
Khari, what are we thinking?
Yeah.
What are we thinking?
All
right. So let's start with something.
What do they call this? Like, what do they call this show? Celtics press pass? No, it's Patriots. Okay,
Patriots press pass. It's Patriots press pass, baby. And we had Mac Jones in the thumbnail, so maybe we touch on him first. What are we thinking?
So I found it interesting, and obviously this saga with Mac Jones is going to be just wildly interesting all throughout. Now, I think really this whole crop of third-year quarterbacks, we talk about year 3 with these quarterbacks being just this groundbreaking year where you're supposed to kind of have it figured out. If you're good, you're good. And if you're not good, then basically that's it. You're going to start thinking about moving on from you, though there are some exceptions to that rule, right? We just had Daniel Jones get paid, even though he went ahead and just basically popped off for 1 year. Popped off for 15 touchdown passes or whatever it was.
It was a good Daniel Jones season.
It was a good Daniel Jones season that turned into $40 million a year or whatever it is. So that's the kind of situation you don't want to be in. So you want to see these guys jump off, and we've seen it several times over the last couple of years. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, right? Guys that in year 3 took substantial leaps. It is time for Mac Jones to do that with the New England Patriots. I'm a little about the personnel they have around him. I think it's marginally better. I do. But I think what they've done with Bill O'Brien, they are really counting on him being the one that unlocks Mac Jones. And I think there is something. There's something to that. I can't tell you that I think that Bill O'Brien is going to turn him into an all-pro. But I think that, and this gets to what Mike Reese was saying in his most recent Sunday, kind of Sunday roundup, Sunday notes.
Must read.
Yes, if you are a Patriots fan, you need to be reading Mike Reese's Sunday update every single week. Yeah. Don't miss it.
That's homework, fun homework.
Yes. And so one of his notes down there at the end was that it started off with James Robinson, the new running back, one of the new free agent running back signings for the Patriots, noting, hey, Mac Jones is really well conditioned. He's working really hard, all that good stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But then the last line of that was that Mac Jones, according to people that are close to him, that his mentality is a lot more like what we saw out of him that rookie year than what he was looking like coming into last year, where there was just a notable discomfort with a lot of stuff that was going on. And that kind of, set off the radar in my head. Not that it's going to be like, oh, Mac Jones is going to throw for 5,000 yards, but Mac Jones is going to be better than he was last year.
And a lot of that, you're expecting that Bill O'Brien is going to bring stability. He's going to bring leadership. And he's also, I think, going to be the perfect marriage, obviously, between the old Patriot system, kind of the Josh McDaniels, even the Charlie Weiss, kind of like foundational elements that you had with more of the Tom Brady era. But you also have Bill O'Brien, the Alabama offensive coordinator, who understood how they ran their system. Now, he kind of downplayed the involvement that Mac Jones had when the stories were saying, oh, Mac Jones was teaching him the Alabama playbook. Of course, I'm sure Bill O'Brien put plenty of his own spin on it, but he's a guy who understands how to adapt to his quarterbacks as someone who's also a quarterback coach. So here's just one little element that I've kind of been looking into recently. RPOs. Everybody loves talking about them. Not all of us necessarily know what they look like all the time because they can be hard to dissect on the live broadcast. But basically any play where the quarterback has the option to either throw it off or pass the ball. Now, this isn't the same as play action, which usually occurs further downfield, and the offensive line is pass blocking to make it look like run. RPO, the offensive line is truly trying to slowly climb to the second level and respond to what the defense gives them so they're not flying downfield and getting penalties. Now, this is something that if you watch Mac Jones in his last college game, it was some of the highest RPO usage he's ever had in his college career.
Really, just the entire college football playoff.
Yeah.
Right. So he did it a lot against Ohio State in the championship game, but against Notre Dame, it was wild how much they were using RPO. I mean, we're talking in like 70% of his pass attempts. And to your point, right? The idea is it's not even just about so play action, like you fake the run, right? Like you're running short route combinations for a run blocking scheme, so you've got to get it out of your hands within that 1 to 2 second window where they're going to give you the little bit of a grace period, okay? Right. And you kind of fudge the lines with that. But one of the fun things that I would keep an eye on is a few times they would actually run RPO in practice. Like you could tell what it was. And you could tell because I always felt like Mac Jones read it so well, so quickly because he just knows how to deal with that. The thing that killed me, right, is that you have teams like the Dolphins, we've been screaming about it for 2 years now, right? That they just don't do RPOs. Matt Patricia had a comment last year about it being kind of like a, college offense, which basically is to say kind of in a derogatory way. I felt like it was like kind of gimmicky. But you see the Dolphins feasting off of RPO with Tua Tagovailoa because they know that he can run it well. Right. But the thing is, they were not running complex RPO schemes, partly because I don't think they knew how to teach them particularly well.
Very fair.
And partly because I think it was a creativity issue. So every single time you would see an RPO for like probably 10 games into the season, it was a fake handoff to a bubble screen. And it's like, okay, everybody knows that now. What do you have next? Bill O'Brien might actually have something more than just a bubble screen RPO. And that I feel like I think that's how you're going to really unlock Mac Jones because he is a quick decision maker when you allow him to make quick decisions.
Exactly. Because, obviously Mac Jones isn't the best athlete, but he wins with his mind. So you want to give a guy like him as many options as possible on a play so that based on whatever the defense gives him, he can make adjustments. Now, this can come in the form of audibles, of making certain checks at the line and adjusting whatever the offense is doing pre-snap based on what they get, whatever look they get from the defense. But RPOs give him the option, like you said, last year, and Mac's entire career, he only has 4 downfield RPO attempts in his entire career. Last year, it was all screens or runs, which you're starting behind the line of scrimmage. Now, especially, and in these spread formations on early downs, teams know when these plays are coming. Usually you have the same types of looks because you have to get certain concepts. Now, it's harder to defend when you've got, and this is what Mac was really good at in college, if you have a slant route. Now, he's got the accuracy and the ball placement to be able to deliver those perfectly consistently, but also the ability to use his eyes to get defenders out of the window, make them think that they're going to run, and actually create bigger windows over the middle of the field. Can also take easy little quick outs that teams give you if they want to play that soft cover 3 on early downs. Or, and this is where it starts to kind of blend where defenses get confused, is it a play action or an RPO? If it's a slower moving play like an outside zone, where you're trying to get horizontal displacement and push guys sideways rather than getting upfield where you can kind of get penalized. On those plays, you have more time for things to develop. And that's where you see Mac, and he was really good at this, especially, again, against Ohio State, going deep and actually attacking downfield on fades outside. And that's the kind of thing you're hoping maybe Tyquan Thornton, maybe he could be like a Devontae Smith light, because a lot of the concept you see on Devontae Smith's tape on these plays are some of the things that Tyquan Thornton was trying to do in his rookie year. And then you also got someone like Devontae Parker, obviously really good when he's isolated on the backside. So I think they've got the tools, and Mac Jones has shown the prowess to not just take the screens and all the kind of simple RPOs, but actually use his eyes, make reads, and start doing more complex things where the defense has a lot more to think about pre-snap. And that, I think, is where you start talking about Bill O'Brien. That's where he helps make your quarterback better.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some people in the comments. By the way, thank you all so much for joining the stream and commenting and joining the conversation. I'm seeing some people say that Mac Jones, I don't see him as a AJ says this. I'm not like, he doesn't see Mac Jones as a quick decision maker and terrible at going through progressions. I don't agree with that. I've seen him in practice and in games show that he can do that. And in particular, there's this one example that struck me from mini camp last year, where they've got the play lined up. He can see man coverage is coming because they did a pre-snap motion, and cornerbacks are following. It's like, okay, I got man coverage right here. And then they switch it to robber at the last second, right? So safety comes down in the box, and he's just like, oh, okay. And just without even thinking about it, he just goes backside to a swing out of the backfield and checks it down. And it's like, okay, you messed up my plan. What I thought I was going to get, not even going to sweat it. Going to go the other way. He's capable of doing that. Now, I'm not going to sit up there and act like he did it perfectly all of last year. I do think that some of that was the offense not being the details for the offense generally were bad. They were poor. Right. And so you had receivers running terrible routes with no spacing. You had on 3rd and 5, every receiver is running a 10 to 11 yard route. So he's sitting there. So here's the thing. When you talk about progressions, like he's not good at going through his progressions. First of all, what are the progressions? Right. Do you know what those progressions are? Do you know where his eyes are supposed to start? And you can see on the all 22 where he thinks his eyes are supposed to be at. And occasionally it's not. You could say it's not correct, or, okay, maybe that's not what you should be doing. But he's looking at it like, okay, that guy's not open. He's not even turned around looking for the ball yet. That guy's not even out of his break. That guy, he's not looking at me at all. What am I supposed to do with the football? And again, it just feels like so often you're looking at it like, what's he supposed to do? Or you check through an audible and it's like you got guys running the wrong play and you're just like, what are you supposed to do? Now, that's not every single time. There have definitely been times where you're like, okay, Mac, throw that ball. That guy was open coming out of your break and you're not trusting it because the confidence is not there. But I think that in his natural state, Mac Jones, and again, as a rookie, that's the kind of stuff he did do well. And you can still hear opponents say like, and this is after this year, where guys were like, yeah, Mac Jones is still seeing some things that we didn't expect him to see. And he's keeping the ball out of harm's way in ways that we didn't expect. Now, obviously, that's notwithstanding the interceptions he was throwing at the beginning of the year. But again, I feel like we don't want to get into this mode where we want to talk about him being terrible at progressions or terrible at reading defenses, when I don't think that's really the truth. And I don't think last year is a great representation of what he can really do because of what he was working with at just all levels, just bad football all over the place.
Yeah, and I mean, you're starting from the ground up here with Bill O'Brien. And I think that's kind of the theme that he's been harping on, is that what happened last year, they didn't have enough, like I said, discipline, structure, things like that, so that the receivers weren't taking extra steps from their routes, weren't at the places they were supposed to be. And then you also, like you said, needed Mac Jones to pull up his end of the bargain as well. So you're hoping that you see a marked improvement this season there.
Yeah, and you know what? Look, it is fair to say, of course, that Mac Jones he just needs to play better football, and he needs to show better body language on the field, which, again, I think it's probably a testament to him that he didn't freak out until like week 13 or whatever it was, because I think a lot of other people might have lost their minds a lot quicker. But then you saw things like the Raiders game where to me, that was mental Mac Jones, where he was upset, he was flustered, and he played badly. But I think that by and large, that's not Mac Jones, and you would hope that he's not going to do that again this year. So
ideally, but again, a much better system around him. I would say better weapons. I really do like Mike Gesicki and think he's going to be more of a problem than people realize.
I saw what you were putting out there today.
He's not just a slot. Especially when we're talking about this RPO style. That's a place where I could see him excel, especially when it comes to him lining up outside, where people don't really expect. If you put him in a condensed formation, he's got a two-way go. Such a big body over the middle, especially if you get those linebackers to kind of bite up expecting the run, you can pop it right over their heads.
And you know what? I think that this is another kind of pet peeve of mine in a way, where you've got people talking about, oh, well, he's just a slot guy, or he's just a this, he's just a that. Okay, maybe another team used him that way, or maybe that's how you see him fitting in, but you got to actually wait and see what it looks like to get them on the field. And to look at the chat, here's another thing that I want to talk about with this good segue into one of our next couple of topics here. I'm seeing a lot of questions about Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas. And I think that the wide receiving core, by and large, I think has just some different elements and a little bit more well-roundedness to it than it did last year, and particularly when you're talking about yards after catch, because it really did feel like, they wanted to go vertical last year, but they didn't really have guys to get open, right? Or run great routes. So you're throwing a lot of 50-50 stuff, to Devontae Parker down the field. Or, it's third down, Jacoby Myers is the only one who's going to get open, I'm just going to throw him the ball. I feel like this year, as you mentioned at the very top of things, we could see something a little bit more like that classic Patriots offense, where it's based around get the ball in guys' hands, put them in positions with ball placement is one of these things that we're going to talk about. With ball placement, let them pick up yards after the catch, because it's not all about, I'm going to push the ball 15, 20 yards down the field every single play. That's not high percentage offense, and that's not what Mac Jones is going to do very well if you ask him to do that every single time. But if you can just trust that you could throw a guy, a 5-yard slant or a little whip route, and they're going to break a tackle and they're going to move the chains for you, I mean, that's demoralizing for a defense. So I think that's the way the Patriots have tried to build themselves, and I want to see much more of that.
Yeah, and if we're going to touch on like Boutte, if we're going to touch on Douglas, those are two guys who I think just make life a lot easier on Mac Jones. Douglas especially, he's an undersized guy, so it's, you're wondering how that's going to translate. But when you saw him running routes in college, even if it was against press, his twitch and speed definitely show up, and the competitiveness. Well, he's not the biggest guy, but he isn't afraid to get physical in his routes. He's good at using leans, head fakes, just whatever he needs to do to create separation when guys try to jam him or make contact when he's in his stem. And then on top of it, once he does separate, he can take passes and actually go long and turn them into home runs or at least big plays. Now, Boutte is not the kind of explosive athlete to that degree. He's not the kind of guy who's going to take the top off consistently, although he does have a different gear with the ball in his hands, where he's kind of like Juju. You wouldn't call him fast necessarily in routes, but when he hits top speed, he can outrun the entire defense. But in his routes, he's got a level of smoothness. When you watch him, it's just really, really clean route running where he understands the mechanics of what he needs to do to get open. He could be more consistent for sure in his technique, and I think that fell off last season. But they're exciting 6th rounders to be talking about, especially obviously when you got a pretty good class, I'd say, especially defensively, bolster the offensive line, which, as we talked about in my interview with Field Yates, the offensive line is a very underrated part of an offensive success, as much as we always want to talk about all the offensive weapons and the shiny toys. So,
Yeah, and you know what? I think that somebody put this in an interesting way when I was on air a couple of months ago, where the offensive line is something like they're the wheels to the car, right? You can't drive without wheels on your car, or you can try, but it's going to be really terrible for you and for your car. Right. Whereas the wide receivers in the skill positions are like the kind of engine that you have. Is it turbo, or is it just standard, right? It's like you can get by with, like, you could drive a car with a standard engine. That said, I feel like if you're talking about winning, I mean, essentially what you're talking about is winning a performance race, which is what the NFL is, right? You're over here trying to compete to win. You kind of need something more, near the performance side of things, the turbo engine, than you necessarily want. Let me just go ahead and get the standard beater engine or something like that. So you got to have both. But I do think the offensive line is going to be very interesting, particularly what are they going to do with Sidey So? Because we kind of bantered it a little bit back and forth on Twitter. The idea that they drafted him with the potential to put him at tackle. He played mostly guard, but he started 10 games as a rookie in college at tackle. He's got the physical profile to make it feasible. But I think that really what you're looking at, in the way that I felt in the moment, was, man, they drafted 3 interior offensive linemen. And so there's insurance there for the interior offensive line. But there's also insurance there for, okay, if we're not really feeling Calvin Anderson or Riley Reif, maybe we could give this kid a shot and see how he does. You know what I mean?
I'm hoping so. Now, I think that City may have a little more tackle flexibility. Obviously, we heard the report afterwards that he was somebody that they were thinking of as more of a flex guy. Even Jake Andrews was someone that Matt Groh described as a guard with experience at center, essentially. So I think the perception that we had on them when all these were announced are a little different than what they were. But the versatility and also just more stability on the inside, because James Ferentz, I feel bad that I keep throwing the guy's age out there, but when you have a 33-year-old as your top interior offensive lineman, and he wasn't really the most physically dominating presence to begin with, or the best athlete, more of a scrapper who did more than you expected as an undrafted guy, it wasn't great depth that they had last year. And especially once Cole Strange struggled and got benched against the Colts, and Isaiah Wynn goes down, it wasn't a great situation in terms of depth that they had. Maybe it was decent at right tackle, but then you had injuries that caught up to them there. So I like what they're doing in terms of actually getting themselves on track and giving Mac Jones protection, which he had so little of last year that they basically couldn't hold the ball for longer than 2.5 seconds, which was as fun as that was to watch. I'm very happy to move on from that style of offense.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that, because I did a little bit of analysis on this, because I think there were people that really thought that the offensive line was terrible and that Trent Brown was terrible. By and large, the offensive line was fine. First of all, Cole Strange, I think, was a lot better than people thought that he was going to be. He had 1 or 2 bad games, right? And that kind of skews the perception, right? I'm not going to front and act like that wasn't bad. Like, dude got benched, right? Because he just wasn't holding up. But I think that he was better by and large than people thought. And he started every game as a rookie. Like, that's just not something that every rookie does. And then Trent Brown was not great, but he was arguably, he was, aside from Michael Onwenu, he was probably the most consistent offensive lineman they had. And he was about average-ish in terms of Pro Football Focus grades, which I tend to put a little bit more stock in when it comes to the offensive and defensive line than I do for some other positions. And he was fine. And I think that particularly for what they're paying him, right? They're not paying him like an elite left tackle. So I think that you could definitely get down with that level of value as long as he's engaged. And that's going to be a lot of Adrian Clem. Can you reach this guy and keep him playing the way that he can play? Because when he plays like that, you're not worried about Trent Brown at all. Now, we kind of meandered toward the offensive line because it is an important piece of this.
It is.
But when you look at the wide receiver depth chart here, you've got a couple of guys, and maybe Matthew Slater doesn't necessarily count to this. He's listed as a wide receiver on like our lads because I mean that's the only other position he's ever played.
They need to make a special teamer designation. Check out my Patriots roster breakdown though. I have specific special teamer tags.
Yes, and that's how we should be thinking of it. Shameless plug. But aside from that, for example, do you see both of those 6th round picks making the team, or do you think it's only going to be one of them?
That's so tough, man. I think we're going to see more of a maybe a redshirt season for somebody. I can see it kind of being Booty, especially considering Demario Douglas gives you an element that you just don't have on offense, like in terms of his explosiveness. He's also can be more of a gadget guy, I think, at the very least, and he has return experience. Now, Booty does as well. But I think his injury status is also something to monitor, where he had the ankle that probably hobbled him in his combine performance. So we'll see how things shake out, especially health-wise. But if they both made the roster and somebody ended up getting traded just because one of those, especially, I think Booty really is the X factor, where if he has a crazy preseason, that's where like big moves are going to have to be made. Because I think maybe this is like my Cody Russi, where last year I was like, he's making the team. And I wasn't too far off. They did try to keep him, and he was a priority for them to maintain. But I do have a feeling that Douglas is going to be a hard guy to keep off the roster. But Booty, he's got the talent to make it. So we'll definitely see. But what are you thinking?
And I have been of the opinion that Kendrick Bourne is not necessarily a lock to be on this team. I was talking about this before the draft. And obviously, like in terms of just like your receiver depth chart, like, yeah, Kendrick Bourne's one of your better receivers.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we'll see if they're really, really turning the page on what happened last year, or if there's any of that they kind of hold on to. I mean, I think that when you get him the ball in his hands, he's electric after the catch. But he's one of those guys that I'm just not sure is so indispensable that you can't – that you can't, get rid of him if you really, really felt like you wanted to. That said, I'm not going to sit up here and say that, oh yeah, they're definitely going to like lose Kendrick Bourne and trade him or cut him for Kayshon Boutte, depending on how he's doing. So I don't want to be on record as saying that like Kendrick Bourne's not going to be on the team. But I just think
I want to hold you to it myself.
I think it's a possibility that that's something you could be looking at, because you could look at that skill set and say that he's arguably the most expendable of that group, if you want to get real about it. But I also
1-year contract. I mean, he's a free agent next year, so
yeah,
they usually cut bait earlier than later. So I mean, you're on the right track.
Exactly, and the thing too is, I also don't want to overpromise things when it comes to 6th round rookie receivers. You know what I mean? Because first of all, they've got a lot to overcome in terms of just the depth chart. So they might get some run. And I mean, of course, one of them might come down with that Foxborough flu. I'm sure they would love that. And you're like, oh yeah, he's having a good spring. Oh, his ankle's looking a little off. Let's go ahead and throw you see somebody on NFI coming off of camp. Or it's just like, oh yeah, they missed a couple days of practice. You know what's coming.
Yeah, it's happening. Oh no, he got hurt in the game. We didn't see it.
Oh man,
very sneaky.
Exactly. So I think that's definitely a possibility. But if they do make the team, I feel like I can understand the excitement. And I mean, I think it's wild that they got Kayshon in the 6th round. I did not see that coming. That is a perfect Belichickian move to go ahead and grab him for that value that late. I just don't want to necessarily be like, oh yeah, he's making the team. That means he's going to be wide receiver 3 by the end of the year. Like, I don't know about all of that, right? But it will be terribly fascinating to see what they do in the preseason.
And similarly, now this is a storyline that's not getting talked about as much. Understandable completely, but they also have a couple late rounders that can make an impact on the other side of the ball. Now, if we want to talk about Isaiah Bolden, kick return specialist, who also led the Jackson State Tigers in defensive snaps played last season, little known fact, and Amir Speed, who actually was at Georgia before he transferred to Michigan State, played more defense for Georgia than he did for Michigan State. He was more of a special teamer there. Now, that's something where I wouldn't be surprised if he is exclusively a special teamer. But the athleticism for these two guys is significant because they're both over 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, and run 4.340s. So we're talking about late round guys who could sneak onto the roster. Obviously, Boutte and Demario Douglas are clearly ahead, not only in the draft selection, but in terms of translatable skill set immediately. But I also think that we need to be talking a little bit more about Bolden and Speed because those are two guys with very interesting physical skill sets.
And again, at the end of the draft, that's the kind of thing you're looking for, right? Mm-hmm. Who is going to be able to provide versatility and special teams asset, which is why part of me is I'm not at all surprised they drafted a punter in the 6th round, for example. Saw that one coming. Drafting a kicker in the 4th round, that was a little wild. I'm not going to lie. That one had me a little bit more like,
I like it.
I know that's Bill. I was 0% surprised he actually did that, but I'm just like, okay, man, sure. But look, that's exactly what you want. And to me, I look at guys like Bolden, and I say to myself, Marcus Jones is your punt returner. I think we feel pretty confident in saying the guy who made All-Pro as a punt returner is going to be the punt returner, right?
Or sneaky Demario Douglas, who he models his game after. Sneaky camp battle.
Yes. So, and I think that you could look at it and say Demario, you would say that Marcus Jones wins that, but if Demario Douglas makes some plays, then you could say, you know what? Okay, every once in a while, if we want to play Marcus Jones more as a cornerback, and we want to make him like the starting slot, or just generally he's going to play more, then that's something that you can have where you can put him in that position and say, you know what? We have a punt returner that can do things, or we've got Isaiah Bolden. We don't, or, we have Douglas and Isaiah Bolden. We don't have to put Marcus Jones as a kick returner, right? Because, okay, you're not necessarily doing kick returns quite as much anymore because, touchback city. But those are usually the ones where you kind of throw your more expendable players. Like, okay, you go ahead and you take these knocks on a kick return. So I think that you're going to see, I don't see both of them making the team. But this is exactly the kind of thing you want to see from this secondary that outside of their top 3 cornerbacks last year, like kind of top 4 cornerbacks, Jalen Mills being hurt kind of threw off the equilibrium of that.
Yeah.
But then you had 3 cornerbacks or, 2 or 3 cornerbacks at the back end of that roster that weren't that good. Yeah. And so you're thinking like churn until you get the best possible depth that you can. And again, you noted the height, speed, weight ratio of this, right? And that's not something the Patriots had last year. What do we always talk about? How tiny the cornerbacks were. And I don't think they necessarily lost, too many games because of that, but you would still love to have the freak athletes at the position and see if you could develop it.
Absolutely. Like, look at the first game of the season. You're going up against A.J. Brown, and then on the other side, you got Devontae Smith. I love Jonathan Jones. I think he's a very good CB2. In the right matchups, I think he's going to win a lot of matchups. But you'd also like to see a couple guys who have the height and the length to be able to contest those guys on the 50-50 plays where realistically they were first-round picks for a reason. Like, they're going to go up and the ball is usually theirs. So you'd like someone that can not only contest those plays but also possibly take it from the other side. And again, 6'3", 200 pounds, that's physical profile you're looking for. Now, again, I don't want to get expectations too high. I will say that because obviously these are guys who are more special teamers. Although, again, Bolden played a lot of defense for the Tigers at Jackson State. But when you're talking about a cornerback room where Christian Gonzalez, maybe Jalen Mills, if they need an experienced guy with more size, I think you're going to see him play a little bit of corner, just not going to be his main role. But I really do think that Bolden and Speed are going to be guys you at least have to watch for as developmental pieces. But in the short term, they're probably going to be a couple special teams demons.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? People will talk about, why are you talking so much about special teams? Well, only because the special teams were bad last year and it cost the Patriots games. So we need more special teams play, like particularly guys that are going to go down there, tackle, know their role. And you think about, you mentioned Jalen Mills potentially being, somebody who, sticks around as a veteran, a guy who could play multiple positions, by the way. The positional versatility is a big thing for me. I also think that when you look at that kind of versatility, I remember watching Brendan Schooler last year and seeing him try to play safety, and he was terrible at it. He just couldn't. he cannot defend the pass. He cannot play actual defensive snaps. But anytime you got this dude on a pursuit drill or special teams, anything, you could immediately see that dude was different, right? So if you see Amir Speed going down there and just blowing up the punt return drills, like there were times where Tyquan Thornton would be doing, punt gunner stuff, and you just knew that when the ball went up in the air, wasn't no way the returner was actually going to be able to return the ball because Tyquan was just already there. Right. If you see one of those, or both of those 7th round rookies out there doing that, I feel like you're going to find a place for them, whether it's practice squad or whether it's active roster. You're going to see them there.
They're just too talented. Those aren't guys you're just going to kick to the street. Especially Bolden was somebody that took a top 30 visit. I don't think that Speed did, or at least it wasn't reported. But the Patriots showed a lot of interest specifically in Bolden, and I think was he the best kick returner in the FCS? Or how?
I feel like I remember that being the case. Like that was like the first thing you saw of Bolden was his return highlights.
Had like almost 30 yards per kick return or something crazy like that, which is a ridiculous number for kick returns.
Nasty.
So, big guy return game, kick returns. I think it was Pierre Strong who was handling a lot of those duties last year, if my memory serves. I haven't watched him return a kick from last year in a very long time.
Yeah, he returned a little bit, but I feel like that was kind of a rotating cast. I think you saw when he was a rookie, Ramondre Stevenson did it a couple of times. Yeah. But really that was the thing, right? As a kick returner, you just didn't see a whole lot of returns. And I think Marcus Jones was probably more like the guy. And then you saw as Marcus Jones started doing more later in the year, and they were using him in offense and defense and punt return, then you started to see Pierre Strong. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see Pierre Strong get another crack at that just because of his speed and also because he kind of, to me, projects as more of a special teams guy himself. Mm-hmm. But I think that you could just never have enough good options on special teams.
I mean, I think last season was a pretty nightmarish kind of wake-up call for that. Obviously, give up 2 kick return touchdowns in one game when you were trying to fight for a playoff spot. And hey, 4th-round kicker. I think we know where their head's at. And they were really serious about addressing this. Obviously, Chris Board as well, which is an addition. I think he's going to end up being a fan favorite. That's a really exciting guy who I'm excited to see in camp.
Oh, he's going to be a Belichick favorite. Well, he already is.
Well, yeah, baby.
He already is.
So I know the offense may not be the explosion in terms of new additions that people necessarily wanted, but I feel like that's just one we're going to have to give some time, see what happens. But until then, you got plenty to be excited about on defense and special teams.
Yeah, and I think that generally, when you look at the grand scheme of things, I don't know that I'm going to sit up there and say that this team is going to be a contender, but I feel like, I won't say that, actually. They're probably not going to contend this year, but I think that this is a team that is going to compete for a playoff spot. They would have competed for a playoff spot last year if they had just had a competent offense. Yeah. And so I think that this year, now that they have a competent offense, and honestly, I like the fact that they went as hard on defense as they did, because they know that, okay, we get the offense right. Now we got to stop all these crazy offenses that are in our division. Yeah. So I'm cautiously optimistic about what we're going to see from the Patriots. Cautiously optimistic about what we're going to see. I'm not going to sit up here and promise you 12, 13 wins, but they're going to look like a better football team than they were last year.
Once again, man, fingers crossed. I love the offseason. I love the waiting and the the projecticizing. I just need to get to camp and watch some football.
Hey, next week you gonna head down there for OTAs?
I'm on my way. So next week I'm taking a pit stop in New York, seeing the family, getting everything situated, and then the week after that I'll actually be in Boston and try to touch down in Foxborough. Can't wait.
Yeah, can't wait either, man. And I will be, because me, I can't escape during the day because I got a full-time job, but I'm gonna be like all on there. You better give me the goods.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna be over here like this the whole time.
I got you, baby. I got you. So we actually went a little longer than expected. I was very excited to have Khari on. But thank you all so much for joining us. We had a great time. Tune in at the end of the week. We're going to have another show for you. Might have some tweets asking for your guys' thoughts on this part of the season. So stay tuned. Thank you so much.